Good evening. My name is Bohdan Fashek, and today we'll go through my favorite book on education, How to Teach Listening by J.J. Wilson. I have an absolute belief that this book is certainly one of the best for ESL teachers, especially when it's connected to listening. The book has so many dimensions. That's why I'll try to mention the ones that caught my attention the most. In other words, the things that were new and hence useful for me. To start with, listening is hard because the sound and thus the words could be very different things in every step of communication. First, the idea of what to say appears in your head. Then you just utter it, and the pronunciation will be anyway different from the ideal. What the other person heard due to his cultural and linguistic background might be distorted as well. Thus, there are so many things that stop us from ideal listening, and we must prepare students for it. J.J. Wilson mentions the most important myths about listening that students and teachers are prone to believe. First is you can't teach how to listen. Well, students shouldn't have this inner feeling that they can't do it at all. Step by step, with patience, it's of course possible. Second is listening is a passive skill. No, it's very active. While listening, students guess, predict, infer, criticize, interpret. The third one is it's easier to understand native language rather than language to holders. Of course, that's a lie. Then we have this one. The skills involved in listening to a foreign language are the same as those that we use for listening to our native language. No, here we lack cultural background. My favorite is the next one. While listening in class, students shouldn't try to understand every word. No, in the majority of listening tasks, we have target vocabulary or target grammar. And the last one, students shouldn't be allowed to read the scripts of recordings. Well, reading a script is a must at my lessons, for instance, because it can be so effectively used later for functional language or target vocab tasks. J.J. Wilson emphasizes on the importance of theoretical knowledge to make the listening more professional. He mentions Professor Crush in his input theory and the natural approach. According to this approach, there are several stages that a speaker undergoes while listening to the foreign language. Everybody has the silent period. It's like with kids. A kid listens to different conversations of a mother and a father before saying at least something. The kid will speak only after some time, and parents probably won't be angry about the kid and doesn't speak during the first month after the birth. Krashen is also famous for bringing some of other notions. For instance, all people learn by incidental vocabulary learning, and students just hear the words and learn new vocabulary by chance. The same in the lesson. Students should learn something that is new, but not a target vocab. The same should be in your listening audio, of course. There are two things that are the most important from the psychological viewpoint. First thing, it's confidence. What kills any development is giving up. So students with a low English level tend to give up so easily, and you as the teacher know it. Students will learn if they listen to audios long enough. So your task is to build that confidence that once the skills will come, just dear students, sit down, put on headphones, and enjoy the study process to the fullest. The problem of not listening to the audio is by default the most important. So the fact that students just sit in the classroom doesn't mean anything. They might listen and think about video games, for instance. So they must listen actively. And active listening can be done in a variety of ways. For example, jigsaw tasks with an information gap, or reporting back task, or making a presentation task, or secretaries. I like the last one so much. It's when the teacher assigns the role of a secretary to one of students, and secretary must note everything down. Then you might somehow use this information in the later tasks. So good. But active listening is not all here. Active participation is a thing that we want to have as well. So there are different ways of doing that. For example, listen and describe task. It's when teacher tells a story but stops regularly and asks some questions. For instance, the teacher begins, I was walking close to my home when I met a girl, and the question, what did she look like? And here the students write a one line description, and it requires so attentive listening here. The next one is interrupted storytelling. As with listen and describe, the students listen to a story, and while doing this, they keep interrupting by asking questions, or you can interrupt it by yourself, and later they need to finish it, for example. Or truth and lie task, it's when you tell the story but something is incorrect just logically, and after that they need to tell what was a lie actually. Or information transfer, it's when they need to complete the diagram based on your listening. Well, while listening to speakers in real life, students must remember the most crucial information. It's impossible to remember everything, so here the memorization happens in the most efficient way when the main information is written. Thus, teaching how to take notes becomes a very crucial skill in the process of ESL learning. On the slide, you can see different ways you can teach note taking. You'll be surprised that the majority of your students don't know how to do it when you try it for the first time. In general, teachers should know why your students are listening to this or that audio, and J.D. Wilson gives a very detailed framework of purposes for listening. First of all, it's listening for gist. In one phrase, it means listening for the main idea. Usually, this is the first listening task in the listening block. Also, listening for specific information. So, the general meaning of the text is not so important. Ability to catch some details, numbers, facts is crucial here. Or listening to detail, it's when we need to compare two paragraphs, for example, or find errors, and the students must listen to everything since you never know what is needed and what is not. And the last one is inferential listening. So anything here is said directly, and you might need to explain the feelings of the speaker, for instance. However, he hasn't said anything, everything is hidden, so they need to infer the real feelings of him. There are three main stages of listening: pre listening, while listening, and after listening. And each title is very clear and logical. You need to make a lead in to the audio so that the audio wouldn't appear like sun rain for the listener. The interest of students should already be there before the listening. As well, students should already know what and how to listen. While listening task requires attention to the task itself, and after listening tasks require discussion and feedback on the results of the students. While speaking about listening, all people pay attention to audios or videos. However, students listen to the teacher more than they listen to audios. That's why, just theoretically, you can teach them more by your own voice and speech if you know how to do it well and if some preparation has happened beforehand. So the teacher's input can be very, very planned, but it requires a lot of time. It can be semi-planned, as I do, for example. It can be totally spontaneous. What is semi-planned input? Is when this pedagogical sequence is prepared beforehand but not scripted. How you can use it? For example, photos. You can show your real photos. You can talk about them, and you need to guess which person in the photo is being described or which photo is actually being described. Also, you can talk about your first in your life, and after that, they need to write, for example, some newspaper article about it. You can tell some anecdotes from your childhood. You can also provide an interview or chat show when you will be or interviewer or interviewee. You need, of course, appear here, but anyway, it's wonderful to use this information after. Or you can tell about your biography. Here we have this idea of teacher as cultural resource. You can use such regalia like passport, wedding certificate, etc., etc. And also, of course, it can be a spontaneous input. So you can just talk whatever you want, but remember that a good talk is always prepared talk, of course. So how to prepare, how a good teacher's talk looks like. First of all, you need to use clear signposting. You need to signal the changes of topic with macro makers and micro markers. For example, moving on, now we will turn to the subject of so, thus, etc. And it's really recommended to have a list of these linkers to make your speech more diverse and more organized. Of course, you also need to move in a linear sequence, so you don't need to jump because it creates a mess. And yes, it requires a lot of experience and preparation. Also, you need to make pauses and you need to paraphrase all the time. For example, sometimes I'm like parrot, repeating the instructions actually twice, and I find it very and very good for students. Also, of course, you should speak very nice and use good vocab. So you need to learn all the time. You need to be a little bit of a designer to support your words with a visual support, um, with the visual stuff. Also, you need to be quite formal, and it's, let's say, discussed. Should it be really like that? But I'm sure that yes, you should be formal. You should always monitor their comprehension, understand if your words reach them, and you shouldn't speak more than it's needed. It means that every utterance ideally should have some purpose and should direct the student somewhere. And very important question: what if I want to create my own listening? And I agree that it's so fun process to do, but also so long. And J.J. Wilson has given us some tips on how to do it in the best way. So, what is the most important for an audio track for ESL listening? He mentions believability, relevance, new information, and appropriateness in language level. And if you have ever done some kind of listening tasks, you will probably relate that it's very hard to match all of these requirements so that you'll have really quality listening. Everything should be rechecked a million times because it will be not so good listening, so be attentive. And on this slide, you see a number of different types of listening activities that can be added to your own listening. And if you see an opportunity and need to make your own tasks, please do it. Beware of the variety that you have, it's really big. And try to make different tasks every time. I use this table myself, and my listening tasks have improved significantly since then. Thank you so much for your attention. See you later. Bye bye.